Somebody posted this recording of Dr. William Thompson saying, "I can't believe we did what we did. Every time I see a child with autism, I feel guilty." And within an hour, CNN took it down. And it was in that moment I thought, oh my God, it's not just my medical talk show that's being produced by the pharmaceutical industry. It's all of television and all of news. No one is going near this story. This story is not going to get told. And I'll be honest with you, as brave as I may seem, I decided, oh well, I'm just going to let that go. And then about 2 weeks later, and this is where I want to talk a little bit about miracles and how I think we're all here for a reason and we're being guided by God right now as we sit in these chairs and as we commune with each other. I get a call from my executive producers that said, "Hey, Del, you should come over to the stage right now. We're at Paramount Studios in the middle of Hollywood. Come over to the stage. You have a show that's going to air tomorrow. It's a pre-taped show. Your show goes live tomorrow, one of the ones that you made last week, and you're missing a segment in your show, so we're going to put this interview we're doing right now in your show, so run over here," which means I have to, there's time codes, like the minutes. I'm going to do a paper edit, what's called, so I can just rush to an editor, quickly cut this thing down, stick it in a show, so it's ready to go live the next day. And I run over to the stage, and I sit down backstage, and I got 10 monitors, and the stage is right out there. I have no idea what the story is. And out on the stage walks a guy named Senator Richard Pan in California. Senator Richard Pan is the senator that created the law SB 277, which was the giant war that erupted in California that was going to force vaccinate every single child in California in order to go to any school. Private, public, didn't matter. This was his brainstorm. Now, I want you to imagine I'm sitting there and I'm watching him talk about this great new law that's he believes he can sweep the country and the world with it. This is how we force vaccinate all those kids that aren't being vaccinated. And I was sitting there, and for me, it was the end of the world as I knew it. It was the end of the way that I was raised. It was the end of the way that many of the Amish live. It was the end of all how chiropractors are raising their children. And it was the end of the future for my little baby that had just been born and wasn't vaccinated. And I was sitting there thinking, the one thing I cannot do is have this show roll on a television and tell this story and have my name attached to it in any way. And so I was sitting there thinking the whole time, I don't even know if I stopped taking notes. I was just thinking, how am I going to get out of this going into my show? I might have to out myself. I might have to admit to them I've never been vaccinated. I've never been to a doctor. I don't believe any of you people or what you're into here. Sorry. And so instead, I ran over to the executive producer's offices and I said, "Hey, that thing was 15, 20 minutes long. I got a 2-minute spot. You don't want to cut it down that short." And they said, "Yeah, you're right. We'll get something else in your show. Forget about it." And I walked out. It's okay, good. It's not on my conscience. But then, as it turns out, it was. It started eating away at me that our show was promoting the forced vaccination of all children on the earth. We kept talking about SB 277. And then there was this whistleblower story that was out there, but I couldn't touch it. And so at a certain point, it really became, it got to a point where I was sitting in my office and I felt like I was suffocating. And I just kept thinking, there's something wrong here. Why would I have all of these talents? Why would these stories be exactly the type of story that I think I can tell better than anyone? And I'm in the only place I can't tell it. And so I sat down on my couch in my office at Paramount Studios and I prayed. And I let God know I'm so thankful for this job. I waited tables for 20 years trying to get my career going. I finally have a career. I've won an Emmy Award. I have a house. I have a family. But God, I feel like I am the filmmaker that can stop laws like SB 277 through media. And I feel like this whistleblower story is so important. If it's true, I want to be the one investigating it. I want to find this Dr. William Thompson guy. And I'm in the one job and career where I can't go near any of these things. I am asking for a sign. Amen. 30 seconds later, my phone rings in my office. And I pick it up and I say, hello. And it's a publicist that does a lot of natural health stories. And she says, hi, Del, it's Donna. I said, hi, Donna. And she said, do you know who Dr. Andrew Wakefield is? Yeah. I mean, like the biggest guy in the middle of this whole vaccine issue that everyone accuses of causing the anti-vaccine movement. The guy out of England that said that he believes vaccines are causing autism. She said, would you like to meet him? I was like, wow. Yeah, definitely. I said, I'm supposed to meet that guy. And she said, well, he's going to be at a meeting in the Hollywood Hills that we're having in 3 days. But I really have to know that you're going to be there because we're going to kick some people out to make room. It's a very small event. And I said, Donna, if you knew when you called me, you would know that I would skip a family wedding right now to meet this guy. I'll be there. And so my wife did a little investigation. We didn't know a lot about him. I just knew he was at the center of this anti-vaccine thing and been accused of fraud and all of these things around the autism vaccine story. And so my wife looked up and found out what his wife looked like. And so we went to this party 3 days later, and we're in this backyard, and she immediately finds his wife, Carmel, and she waves me over, and so I go over and say hi to Carmel. And then I said, hey, Carmel, I'm a producer at the CBS talk show, The Doctors. I'd really like a chance to talk to Andy. And so she waves Andy over, and I end up talking to him for like 30 minutes. Like I'm fascinated. First of all, I don't know if he's a fraud or not. I've always said if I get to meet this guy, I'll know. I interview people for a living. And so I start talking to him. And if any of you have ever met him, it takes maybe 60 seconds, if you're really numb, 2 minutes, to realize that this is probably the most talented, eloquent, brilliant scientist you have ever met. And that whatever they've said about you cannot possibly be true. And so he's talking about vaccines and his journey, and you've got to stop this law, SB 277. And eventually there's a crowd around us that are getting really pissed off because I'm taking all of his time. Apparently he's got a fan base. I didn't know that. And then someone walks up and says, hey, Andy, you got to do your pitch. He's like, sorry, Del, I got to do my pitch. I was like, I don't pitch? I don't know what he's talking about. What does he mean? And he goes over and steps up on a little box in his backyard, and everyone gathers around, and he says, SB 277 must be stopped. If California falls, it'll be the beginning of a wave, and if we lose control of our bodies, if they start forcibly injecting our children and taking away our right to opt out, it will be so devastating for so many kids. I am telling you, vaccines injure children. They injure adults. This is a problem. And he said, and so the reason I'm here and why I'm talking to you is for the last year and a half, I have been making a documentary about a whistleblower inside the CDC named Dr. William Thompson. You ever see those movies where like the clouds kind of part and there's like that one person standing in the crowd and like the sunbeam comes down on him? I mean, it felt like that. I was like, oh my God, literally, wow. And then I thought, you know those people that come up to you and they're like, oh, I went to a tarot card reader. Did I unplug everything? No. I went to a tarot card reader and I heard that we were supposed to work together. I dreamt about someone like you and we're supposed to work together. Or I was praying or whatever the story, and you're just like, cray, cray. I just thought, don't be that guy. This is a scientist. He has no idea where you've come from. Just stick to the facts. And so he got done. I said, Andy, where's this film at? Where are you at? He's like, we're almost done. We need sound and we need a distribution company. I went and I said, great. And so I went off the next day. I went to the only distribution company I'd ever worked with that made really controversial documentaries. I said, would you ever do a documentary about vaccines made by like the most, dangerous guy in the space, Dr. Andrew Wakefield. And they said, "Are you producing it?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "We'll look at it." I said, "Okay, great. I'll call you back." And I only knew one musician that actually did sound scores for films. This guy that my wife had picked up hitchhiking in Topanga Canyon a year earlier. The only human my wife has ever picked up in her life, by the way. She just said, "I had a feeling." So I called Francesco, who did all these beautiful soundscapes for the Terrence Malick films, like Thin Red Line and things like that. And I said, "Francesco, would you ever consider doing a soundtrack for a documentary about vaccines?" And he said, "You mean those things that are killing all of our children?" "I'll call you back." So I called Andy and I said, "Look, I think I can help you out, but I need to see the film." And he said, "Why don't you fly down to my house this weekend and take a look at it?" And I flew down, and so within 7 days of a prayer in my office, I'm in Austin, Texas, in Andrew Wakefield's basement. I woke up in the morning, and I'm sitting watching his 2-hour documentary about the whistleblower and the story that I think could change the world. And he puts 10,000 documents on the floor next to me and says, "This is the evidence of all the fraud that the CDC committed." So I'm spending hours watching the documentary, looking at all of the evidence. And I realized in watching it, in its current state, though Andy thinks this film is finished, maybe 10 people will be able to get through it. It's too scientific. There's so much going on here. And I just had this overwhelming feeling. My mom saying, "What are you doing working on a medical talk show?" I realized I was being trained for this moment right now. And I thought, not only am I qualified to make this movie everything that it can be, I actually think the fact that I'm not vaccinated, that I work on the only show that has ever made science and medicine into entertainment for 6 years, I think I'm actually the single most qualified human being on the planet, which means for this I must have been born. And I have never since that moment thought anything other than we are all being guided in a divine plan that is so much bigger than all of us. Of course, Vaxxed got kicked out of Tribeca Film Festival and swept the world and ended up changing this conversation as I thought it would and igniting a medical freedom movement around the world and catapulting me into this space. So to get where I left off, we were traveling the country and talking about autism specifically. And in those Institute of Medicine hearings that I told you about, the one in 2011, the Institute of Medicine was asked, will you look at specifically autism, whether autism is caused by any form of the diphtheria, tetanus, or pertussis vaccine? This is the 2011, it's a huge thing that looked at all those vaccines I talked about, but it specifically looked at this one. And just so you know, in 1986, when we took liability away from the manufacturers, in a law, basically the pharmaceutical industry blackmailed Ronald Reagan. They said, we're going to stop making all vaccines unless you protect us from liability. He didn't like the idea, but he went along with it. And so when that happened, one of the major complaints was the DTaP vaccine. In that case, it was DTP vaccine. It was the number one vaccine that parents were saying caused autism, which was interesting because as I was traveling the country with Vaxxed was about how the MMR vaccine in a fraudulent study at the CDC appeared to be causing autism. But everywhere I was interviewing people with our film, they'd say, we never even got to the MMR vaccine. Our child regressed into autism after the DTP vaccine or the DTaP vaccine. And so they knew this. The CDC knew this all the way back in 1986. They asked that the CDC investigate it from the very beginning. And so by 2011, they said, has that investigation been done anywhere in the world? And the Institute of Medicine ends up saying at the end of this investigation, the evidence is inadequate to accept or reject a causal relationship between diphtheria toxoid, tetanus toxoid, or acellular pertussis containing vaccines and autism. Why? Because as I told you earlier, not a single study can be found in the world that looked at, does DTaP cause autism? Actually, let me correct that up here. There's one study they found, the Geyer and Geyer study, that found a relationship. And it says this one study, Geyer, was not considered in the weight of epidemiologic evidence because it provided data from a passive surveillance system and lacked an unvaccinated comparison population. Here's the irony. The reason they don't accept this study is it didn't have a placebo group, which they never use themselves. So when it works for them, they say that's why we discounted. So of all the studies they looked for, they found one, and it showed a relationship to autism, and they said, we don't accept it. Therefore, we cannot say whether a vaccine does or does not cause autism, specifically this one. Also, just for a little inside information, there's been a lot of news right now that David Geyer of the Geyer and Geyer is a father-son team. Robert Kennedy Jr. just brought him on to help do the vax versus unvax study. But here's what's amazing. When you go to your pediatrician and you ask your pediatrician, I got this little VSD sheet that says, there might be some fussiness or some swelling in the arm. That's like what they're warning me about. But if you say, but what about serious side effects? It doesn't say it on the sheet. They say, just go to the website at the bottom of that page. And when you go to that website, this is what comes up on the CDC's website. And the very first thing it says at the top, vaccines do not cause autism. You didn't ask if vaccines cause autism. You just asked, are there side effects? This is how sensitive they are to this specific issue. They go out of their way to say, before we get started, just one thing you should know, vaccines don't cause autism. Okay? So you have to imagine, of all of those injuries that we've talked about, what is the one they must have studied the most? Autism, right? Stands to reason. But look what they cite as the evidence that all vaccines do not cause autism. The 2011 Institute of Medicine report, that only looked at one vaccine, DTP, and declared, we can't find any science either way, can't say whether it does or does not cause autism. This is literally all the science they're relying upon to make a pluralized, all vaccines do not cause autism. They never expected anyone to read that report. So, in all of the beautiful miracles that have happened, I ended up teaming up with Aaron Siri, who may go down probably as one of the greatest constitutional attorneys of all times. He is the one that has won all the lawsuits against the government for us. He is speaking in front of the government all the time now in hearings all over COVID. I got a call from a mom in Detroit who said, I'm in a divorce case with my ex-husband, and he's trying to get more custody of my daughter. We didn't vaccinate her, and as a tool to pressure me, he is saying that we have to vaccinate my daughter now. And they're bringing in this guy, Dr. Stanley Plotkin, as a witness on his side. I'm like, Stanley Plotkin? He's like, yeah, Sheikh, do you know who he is? I was like, do I know who he is? Stanley Plotkin is the godfather of the entire vaccine program. There is no one bigger in the world. None of these guys will ever get on a stage with us and debate us in front of you. They will never put their science against our science because they've been getting away with saying what we're saying is misinformation, but they have it right. I called Aaron Siri and I said, you're not going to believe this, but there's a divorce case, and Stanley Plotkin, by the way, the Bible on vaccines is called Plotkin's Vaccines. And it has three co-authors, Walter Ornstein, Paul Offit, and Catherine Edwards. These are all the biggest people there are, and he says, call them and see if I can depose Stanley Plotkin. And he did. And if you haven't gone and seen the deposition, it's a 9-hour deposition. We've cut it down into the most salient pieces. But if you saw A Few Good Men, where the guy's sitting on the stand and he finally just screams, you can't handle the truth! This is that story on vaccines. And so we had him on the stand, and Aaron Siri asked him exactly about this study of the DTaP DTP vaccine that is being used to say all vaccines don't cause autism. Now, just a show of hands, how many people have heard anyone in the news or any experts say that autism is the one thing we've studied? There's a mountain of evidence proving that vaccines don't cause autism. Just raise your hand if you've heard that statement anywhere. Mountains of evidence. Okay, well, this is the guy who would have that mountain, and this is what he said under the oath.
Available evidence with regard to whether Tdap or DTaP can cause autism, and their conclusion was the evidence doesn't exist to show whether DTaP or Tdap do or do not cause autism, correct?
Yes, but the point is that there are no studies showing that it does cause autism, except one study by two well-known anti-vaccination figures, Geyer and Geyer, who have no legitimacy whatsoever. So what they're saying is that there's no evidence, and the important point from my point of view is that there is no positive evidence.
Right.
To do a proper study, as we've been discussing, which would disprove it, would involve the controlled administration of vaccines and withholding vaccines from children who should have them.
But since there's no evidence that DTaP or Tdap don't cause autism, you can't yet say that vaccines do not cause autism, correct?
I cannot say that as a scientist or a logician, but I can say as a physician that no, they do not cause autism.
Okay, so what you're saying is, as a physician or logician, then you couldn't say vaccines do not, you could not say vaccines do not cause autism. But as a pediatrician, you're saying that you would say that to a parent because you want to make sure they get the vaccine, is that right?
You know, I can't be sure that DTaP doesn't cause leprosy. That doesn't mean that that stops me from using a DTaP vaccine.
Are people claiming that DTaP has caused leprosy? Are you aware of any such complaints?
I'm not aware of any such complaints, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it on the web one of these days.
Okay, but people have made enough complaints about DTaP, Tdap causing autism that the Institute of Medicine at the commission of HHS thought it was serious enough to do a scientific review, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't know whether DTaP or Tdap cause autism, shouldn't you wait until you do know, until you have the science to support it, to then say that vaccines do not cause autism?
Do I wait? No, I do not wait, because I have to take into account the health of the child.
And so for that reason, you're okay with telling the parent that DTaP, Tdap does not cause autism, even though the science isn't there yet to support that claim?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm also willing to tell them it doesn't cause leprosy.
Okay. Again, did the IOM review whether DTaP causes leprosy?
No.
Okay.
I want this to sink in for a second. This is not some uneducated pediatrician that just went through med school. This is the guy that wrote your vaccine program. He is on the board of every vaccine maker in the world. When these ACIP meetings happened for the first time, you all heard Bobby Kennedy just fired all of the advisory committee on immunization practices. When those meetings start, the gavel that starts that meeting is called the Plotkin gavel. When this guy tells you, I am telling people that vaccines don't cause autism as a pediatrician, but I have no science as a scientist to back that up, you should take him for his word. But I'm not going to stop there. My wife always says to me, Del, you got to know when you've won an argument. You just keep going on and on and on. I'm going to do that a little bit here because Catherine Edwards, let's see if she pops up here, is the other author on Plotkin's vaccines. And we had her on the stand in an autism trial of a child. They were claiming that the pediatrician should not have given the amount of vaccines at the time to this child. And she was sent in as the witness to prove that vaccines are safe and there's no way they could cause autism. So again, second biggest person in vaccines in the world shows up into in this case it was during COVID, so she's on a Zoom call from her home, but her entire purpose that she is prepared for is to prove to the courts, no way can vaccines cause autism. I have the proof. Let's see how this goes.
According to your profile, you have done most of the pivotal trials relied upon to license many of the vaccines, correct, on the market?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're highly experienced at conducting clinical trials, correct?
I'm highly experienced conducting clinical trials.
Okay. And you're familiar with many of the clinical trials that relied upon to license many of the vaccines currently on the market, correct?
I am.
Okay. In your opinion, did the clinical trials relied upon to license the vaccines that Yates received, many of which are still on the market today, were they designed to rule out that the vaccine causes autism?
No. You've badgered me into answering the question the way you want me to, but I think that that's probably the answer.
Is that your accurate and truthful testimony?
Yes.
In the expert disclosures for this case, it asserts that, among other things, you will testify that, quote, the issue of whether vaccines cause autism has been thoroughly researched and rejected, end quote. It's your testimony that MMR vaccine cannot cause autism.
That's correct.
It's your testimony that Hep B vaccine cannot cause autism.
That's correct.
It's your testimony that IPOL cannot cause autism.
Yes.
It's your testimony that HIV vaccine cannot cause autism.
Yes.
It's your testimony that varicella vaccine cannot cause autism.
Yes.
It's your testimony that Prevnar vaccine cannot cause autism.
Yes.
And it's your testimony that DTaP vaccine cannot cause autism.
Yes.
And do you have a study that supports that DTaP doesn't cause autism?
I do not have a study that DTaP caused autism, so I don't have either.
Do you have any study one way or another of whether IPOL causes autism?
No, I do not, sir.
Do you have any study one way or another of whether NGRX-B causes autism?
I do not have any evidence that it causes autism, nor that it does not.
And what about HIV titers vaccine? Any evidence one way or another of whether it causes autism?
No.
And what about Prevnar vaccine? Any evidence one way or another?
No, sir. No, sir.
And how about varicella vaccine? Let me just finish. Are there any studies one way or another that support whether it does or doesn't cause autism?
Part of MMR, but not as varicella by itself. No, sir. No studies that say it does, or no studies that say it doesn't.
Right. There have been studies that have found an association between hepatitis B vaccine and autism, correct?
Not studies that I feel are credible.
Okay. Which study are you referring to when you say that?
Well, why don't you show me the study, and then I'll see whether I agree with it.
I mean, that's that moment where I drop the mic. In any courtroom in the world, I just proved to you the two biggest experts that exist, that are alive, that have made your vaccines, have approved your vaccines, have put them on the schedule, under oath, just said to you, we don't have a single study that was ever done that proves that all of these vaccines don't cause autism. And so what is Sanjay Gupta saying when he says this has been extensively studied? What are the doctors saying when they say that Robert Kennedy Jr. is spreading misinformation, saying that there's any connection at all with vaccines and autism? What's happening when Robert Kennedy Jr. is sitting in that hearing to be confirmed as HHS secretary, and both Republicans and Democrats are screaming at him, if you want this job, admit it now. There's mountains of evidence. This has been proven. Vaccines do not cause autism. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. Trying to remember the nemesis that we were dealing with on the Republican side the whole time. Anyone remember his name? Cassidy. Bill Cassidy. There's a mountain of evidence. I mean, I couldn't have sat there. I would have said, hold on a second, let me get my laptop, you jackasses. I want to end this right now for the entire world. But Bobby sat there, he took it, he was coached well. Just deal with it, we'll get you in. But do you realize how terrifying this is? This is the biggest claim there is against vaccines. This is the one thing they have told you that we have studied it extensively, and they don't have a mountain. They don't have a hill. They don't have a molehill. They don't have a mound. All they have is faith. An assumption that these are safe. An assumption, as he said, I, as a pediatrician, have to care about the safety of the child. Therefore, I just assume that they're safe and tell you you have to get them. And once again, why does this matter to me? Because I have done far too many interviews like this.
Hi, how you doing? We have triplets, 2 boys and a girl, Richie, Robbie, and Claire. Every day in our life was a party. Every single day they were smiling and laughing and looking at each other, engaging in each other. On June 25th, 2007, we brought them in for the pneumococcal shot. My daughter still has the mark on her leg from the shot. She was the first one to get it, and she screamed and never really stopped screaming after that. But we continued. We didn't know. We did the boys as well. By noon, Claire shut completely off. It was as if she was blind and deaf, and all she did at that moment was stare at the ceiling fan. So that was at noon. We had the shot at 10 a.m. 2 o'clock, we watched Richie shut off. They lost all their reflexes. I'm an educational audiologist. I actually did the test for the stapedial reflex, which is a little muscle in the middle ear, just to see if a muscle they can't control was still working, and it didn't. The stapedial reflex dampens sound, so your ears don't hurt from a really loud sound, and both of them had no stapedial reflex. They stopped blinking, stopped yawning, stopped coughing, stopped sneezing.
The worst is when we saw the final one shut down. We were told it was genetic. And then we were told by geneticists that there's no possible way 3 children would shut off on the same day. So we had severe autism spectrum disorder for all 3 kids entering kindergarten. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to recover them. The only person that we got back is Robbie, the one that was last to shut off. Richie can only say single, maybe 2 words together. Claire is still completely nonverbal, not potty trained, and Robbie is approaching grade level, but severe OCD. So,
what do you do? What's your
property management? Let me tell you what a day in our life is. So you got, say, a 6 or 7 or 8 year old child who's not potty trained, and at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning they fill their diaper. Well, you assume that's pretty uncomfortable, so they take it off. Pretty soon it's all over them, it's all over the bed. In short order, it's all over me, it's all over her. I'm snapping at her, she's snapping at me. We're both snapping at the kid, who is the only innocent party in the whole scenario. And the one thing that's conspicuously absent from that scenario is anybody who told you that shot was safe. They were all asleep in their bed. They haven't got a problem in the world.
First of all, people say, do you believe vaccines cause autism? This one interview right here does it. It's all I need. Because what they said is true. All of the money since 2000, not a dollar has been spent by our government looking at vaccines and autism. It's been looking at genetics. Is it genetic? It was just going to happen. Genetics don't happen in one afternoon. You don't suddenly all regress into the same issue within hours of each other. But when I think about this story, I just can't imagine as each child is disappearing from you. Can you imagine the horror and the prayers they must have been saying before that last child? Please, no, not all three of them. And there's millions of people around the world that have had this story and have been gaslit by our government, by our regulatory agencies, by everyone in media, and frankly, every doctor that injected this vaccine into them. They're said to be crazy, and they're told if you keep complaining about it, we'll call a therapist. Maybe your children are at risk. Maybe we should call CPS because you obviously are not dealing with the obvious, which is this is genetic and this is just the way it is. I can't imagine a greater torture, I really can't, than having your child destroyed and then have everyone in the world look at you like you're nuts when you try to talk about it. No one there for you. No one will listen to your story. But luckily, people like Robert Kennedy Jr. and so many others and me decided we're going to do something about it. And by 2019, we were making so much headway that this became the headline around the world. WHO says anti-vaxxers are a global health threat. I've never been more proud in my life. We made it into the top 10 global health threats, anti-vaxxers. And in December of 2019, now I'm going to take you on a journey. Are you ready to understand what was really going on during COVID? Okay. In 2019, December, they decide they're going to do something about this, and they host the Global Vaccine Summit with the WHO in Geneva, Switzerland. They bring in scientists from all over the world to discuss one topic. How do we stop vaccine hesitancy? This is now a global health threat. It's bigger than our issue with polio. They are growing in leaps and bounds, and they must be stopped. And so they hosted this event. They didn't know there was cameras rolling, or at least they forgot that this was a public venture. And I did a whole show, and you can watch it at thehighwire.com, on all the amazing things they said behind closed doors. But one of my favorite things was 3 days before this event, the head scientist for the WHO put out a PSA to the world on how vaccines are so safe. And even when there's a brand new one, we have this amazing post-marketing system that catches any problem there might be. Unfortunately, 3 days later, she was inside of this meeting and forgot cameras were rolling. But let's go ahead and let her do the talking.
Vaccines are very safe. If someone gets sick after vaccination, it is usually either a coincidence, an error in administering the vaccine, or very rarely a problem with the vaccine itself. That's why we have vaccine safety systems. Robust vaccine safety systems allow health workers and experts to react immediately to any problems that may arise. They can examine the problem rigorously and scientifically, look at the data, and then promptly address the problem. WHO works closely with countries to make sure that vaccines can do what they do best, prevent disease without risks. New vaccines against malaria, meningitis, and encephalitis in Asia and Africa are now being thoroughly monitored with support from WHO. Vaccines are one of the safest tools we have to prevent disease and ensure a healthy future for all children. I think we cannot overemphasize the fact that we really don't have very good safety monitoring systems in many countries, and this adds to the miscommunication and the misapprehensions because we're not able to give clear-cut answers when people ask questions about the deaths that have occurred due to particular vaccine, and this always gets blown up in the media. One should be able to give a very factual account of what exactly has happened and what the cause of deaths are. But in most cases, there's some obfuscation at that level, and therefore there's less and less trust then in the system. Putting in place the mechanisms, whether they're cohort studies or whether they're sentinel surveillance sites, to be able to monitor what's going on and report back, and then for corrective action to be taken, because unexpected things could arise after introduction, and one always has to be prepared. As we've seen, in the history of many drugs, you've learned about adverse events only after the drug's been licensed and introduced into the population. So I think that risk is always there, and the population needs to understand that and feel confident that mechanisms are being put in place to study some of those things.
Is that the most unbelievable thing you've ever seen? I mean, she literally made a PSA saying, we have robust safety monitoring systems around the world so that when we introduce a vaccine, we're able to determine right away if there's an issue. And then 3 days later, to all of her scientific friends who, if she had it wrong, would interrupt her, saying, we really need to work to put in some monitoring systems. I mean, not even saying our monitoring systems are bad, saying we don't have any at all, and we should put some in because it's making it impossible for us to deal with people that are complaining about deaths and injuries from vaccines. The media called me out on this. This was pulled down. It's one of the most censored videos we ever put out. The headline was that I lied, saying that she lied. They said that I hadn't proven that she lied. By the way, I don't even say anything in this. I just show the one video and then say 3 days later, I think it posted, head scientists at WHO caught lying. And they said, even though they reached out to her and WHO refused to respond on this issue, and it is clear she appears to be saying very different things, Del had no idea what her intention was. And therefore, if he didn't know that her intention was to lie, he can't say that she's lying. I asked Aaron about that. He said, technically, they're right. I guess in court, you have to prove that you know you're lying. And maybe 3 days apart, the difference between having robust monitoring systems and then saying maybe someday we should start putting in some monitoring systems isn't a lie. But it's incredible. To understand how bad this problem was, this is what the head psychologist had to say at this meeting. This is how the video came out. So they have some graphs, and she's in the corner. This is Heidi Larson explaining the problem with vaccine hesitancy and how bad it's getting and where the real weakness is. Listen to what she says here.
We have a very wobbly health professional front line that is starting to question vaccines and the safety of vaccines. That's a huge problem. Because to this day, any study I've seen, and we're constantly looking on any studies in this space, still the most trusted person on any study I've seen globally is the healthcare provider. And if we lose that, we're in trouble. Some of the challenges are when the frontline professionals are starting to question, or they don't feel like they have enough confidence about the safety to stand up to it to the person asking them the questions. I mean, most medical school curriculums, even nursing curriculums, in medical school, you're lucky if you have a half day on vaccines, never mind keeping up to date with all this.
I'll let that sink in for a second. Because people will say to me, Del, you have no medical license. You're saying you know more than my pediatrician? Well, technically, I have read every trial there is on vaccines over the last 7 years. I've caught everyone that made your program lying in lawsuits. And as the leading authority psychologist for the WHO has just stated, your pediatrician is lucky if they had a half-a-day education on vaccines. And let's be clear, room full of scientists, you don't hear some voice out there going, blasphemy! They're all like, yep, yeah, we know that's a problem. Slight problem. Everyone giving these vaccines knows absolutely nothing about it. And how could they when literally the creators of the vaccine program cannot find a single study? What are the pediatricians that haven't been taught anything? What are they going to have to say? And then they're told, just kick them out of your office if they start asking too many questions. Because that's all we got. We got no answers. All we can do is turn into bullies and say, you're crazy. Get your crazy, sick, disease-filled kids out of my office right now. We are living in the dark ages here, folks. Science, I told you, it is not science. If I have to have faith that my pediatrician was properly trained on vaccines, how vaccines are made, what is in them, how the immune system works, how the immune system's triggered, how the immune system might be dysregulated, how there might be issues. If I have to have faith that that's happening, if I have to have faith that the people that made these vaccines did double-blind trials and made sure they were as safe as every other drug that we take, if I have to have faith that my pediatrician is doing more studies and starting to investigate this issue as more and more parents are asking them questions, if I have to have faith that the CDC and the ACIP committee made sure double-blind trials were done before they put this onto the schedule, if it takes that much faith with zero evidence, then I rest my case. This is the biggest, most disgusting, I wouldn't even call it a religion. It's a cult. It's a cult that is injecting your children with bacteria and live viruses and aluminum and formaldehyde and polysorbate 80 and the protein cells of hamsters and monkeys. And yes, aborted babies are being injected into your children as a part of this insane ritual that none of us agreed to. And we can't put our kids in school unless we go through it. It is wicked. So shockingly, after a 3-day symposium on how to stop vaccine hesitancy, how do we get people inspired to vaccinate again because they're really starting to wobble. Even our doctors are starting to question us. We got to think of something. We must think of a way to make people believe in vaccines again. 2 months later,
a SARS-like virus, which has infected hundreds in China, has now reached the United States.
The first confirmed U.S. case now in Washington state.
Second case, a woman in Chicago. Third case,
Orange County, Arizona. Airports around the world are stepping up health screenings on passengers arriving from Wuhan, China, the epicenter of the outbreak.
Tonight, China reporting dozens of deaths.
It's killed at least 81 people in China.
More than 900 people infected worldwide.
More than 2,700 others have been infected across 13 countries.
People infected with the coronavirus can spread the disease before showing symptoms.
We don't know just how deadly this is. There could be many, many people out there infected.
But it's still a lot unknown about how it spreads.
The contagiousness of the patient is so much more evident.
This is a rapidly changing situation, both here and abroad.
I'm urging HHS to declare a public formal health emergency for the coronavirus.
Two months. All the greatest immune scientists in the world got together. We have to think of a way to inspire the world to vaccinate again. And suddenly a cold virus is deadly. It's sweeping the world. We're all going to die. And what's the solution? A vaccine. The only way, and they all said it, the only way out of this, Bill Gates, everybody, the only way out of this pandemic is everyone needs to get a vaccine, and we're going to warp speed one to you immediately. Immediately. I don't know. I can only prove it's a massive coincidence. But when you look at what happened, you'd have to ask yourself, okay, if it was real, it's a real virus, it's really sweeping this country. They got up in the Senate and the Congress and everywhere and said, we are looking so hard to figure out how to deal with this, but we really, no matter what, believe it's going to be a vaccine that saves us. Obviously, Donald Trump got into warp speed. I want to point out, by the way, because people ask, warp speed originally was supposed to be to warp speed vaccines, repurpose drugs as an investigation. Let's fund tons of different ways we can handle this. It very quickly became all about the vaccine, and that's what I'm going to prove to you now. How far would the WHO and the scientists of the world and your own government go to make this all about vaccines and getting you into a vaccine program? What Donald Trump did not realize was this little thing right here. This was the emergency use authorization. That vaccine, with all of you watching, by the way, was going to have to go through a longer trial than they'd ever seen. They weren't going to let you watch a 5-day safety trial that they did for hepatitis B because they know you'd say, this is ridiculous, I'm not taking that thing. So they set up for a 2-year safety trial, but as they told you, the virus is here now, we got to get out of this early, and the only way we can skip out of the safety trial early, while you're watching us, is an emergency use authorization. And there was a rule to it. COVID-19 pandemic, under an EUA, FDA may allow the use of unapproved medical products or unapproved uses of approved medical products in an emergency to diagnose, treat, or prevent serious or life-threatening diseases, or conditions when certain statutory criteria have been met, including that there are no adequate, approved, and available alternatives. The only way they can rush this vaccine warp speed out of a safety trial is there has to be no other way to treat this anywhere in the world. Otherwise, it'd be illegal. Otherwise, they'd have to do a safety trial. If you have a product that works, they're going to have to go the full term on this safety trial. So remember that moment where Donald Trump got in front of the cameras and he said, I just heard about a drug called something like hydroxychloroquine when I kind of messed it up. And there's been studies done, and I've looked at them, and they look like they're having a really great effect on the COVID-19 virus. And so I have instructed the FDA to make this available all across the country because I believe this may be an answer so that we can get out of this epidemic right away. And I was sitting there going, oh my God, wow, this is incredible. But then all of a sudden, like Tony Fauci, like it was almost like he had football pads on. Like comes on, he's like, get out of there. Like Trump like gets knocked back, and Fauci's like, don't listen to him. It could cause heart attacks. We don't know anything about hydroxychloroquine. There have to be long-term randomized control trials. This is dangerous. Don't go near this drug. We're all like watching it on television going, what the heck is going on here? I've never seen a president like arguing with the head of their medical department over a drug. This is what was going on. Donald Trump did not realize that if hydroxychloroquine works, this rushed vaccine story is dead. It must not work. Unfortunately, immediately, Henry Ford, one of the biggest medical institutions there is, did a study on their own population. Hydroxychloroquine lowers COVID-19 death rate, Henry Ford study finds. It's one of the best institutions in the world. Officials with Michigan Health System said the study found the drug significantly decreased the death rate of patients involved in the analysis. The study analyzed 2,541 patients hospitalized among the system's 6 hospitals between March 10th and May 22nd and found 13% of those treated with hydroxychloroquine died, while 26% of those who did not receive the drug died. A 50% reduction in death using hydroxychloroquine. Unequivocal. 50% reduction. So just think about it for a second. Over 1 million people in America are said to have died of COVID, and had they been given hydroxychloroquine based on board study, 500,000 people would still be alive right now. 500,000. How many of you know someone that died of COVID, just out of curiosity? What does it make you think that your government and your medical institutions had a drug that could have saved your loved one, but they hid it from you because they had an agenda? It would have gotten in the way of their rushed vaccine program. It's unbelievable, right? So that was a problem, and Tony Fauci had to stop it. So as soon as this study came out, a Lancet study, he ran out in front of the television and said, well, hey, check out this study. When compared with mortality in the group, hydroxychloroquine with a macrolide, and chloroquine with a macrolide were each independently associated with an increased risk of in-hospital mortality compared with the control group. Suddenly, Fauci had a study that showed, no, hydroxychloroquine is dangerous. In this study, it showed that more people died that got the hydroxychloroquine. And he touted it, and they said, see, I told you so. Lots of doctors at this point started getting nervous. This is where a lot of doctors jumped off, by the way, because they all knew hydroxychloroquine is like the safest drug there is in the world. We give this to Ethiopians with distended stomachs to protect them from malaria, and they don't die. We give this all over the world for lupus, and nobody's died. So how could this study possibly be true? And then doctors started looking at the cohorts that they used, and they were seeing 40-year-olds dying in satellites. And it was a huge study. It had satellites all over the world. They're like, but you have like 30 and 40-year-olds dying, and we're not seeing that in America. We're not even seeing that in Africa. We want to see all of your evidence. Where is the evidence for these people that you say are dying? We want to see that evidence. Peter McCullough was one of the ones that started demanding it, and doctors like him. And finally, the paper was retracted. It was pulled back. The best way to understand why is this article by Surgisphere. About Surgisphere. Governments and WHO changed COVID-19 policy based on suspect data from a tiny U.S. company. A Guardian investigation can reveal the U.S.-based company Surgisphere, whose handful of employees appear to include a science fiction writer and an adult content model that has provided data for multiple studies on COVID-19, co-authored by its chief executive, but has so far failed to adequately explain its data or its methodology. A science fiction writer and a porn star made a study that Tony Fauci used to stop hydroxychloroquine for all of your loved ones. Did you hear that on the news? Did you hear him come back out and say, my bad? No. They had to do something about it. They had to run studies that would prove what they wanted to prove. How far would they go? They ended up running 2 large studies funded by us in England. Bill Gates was in there. Let me explain something. The first guy to say hydroxychloroquine worked was Didier Raoult out of France. He started doing studies in China immediately. Why did he choose hydroxychloroquine? Because Tony Fauci and the NIH 15 years earlier during the MERS outbreak discovered that hydroxychloroquine not only stopped SARS the first time it happened in the Middle East, it could protect against it and it could cure it. It was like a cure-all. It wasn't a mystery. Tony Fauci himself knew hydroxychloroquine worked. And it's why Didier said, let me do some studies with it. And he came public and said, not only can we treat SARS-CoV-2, this respiratory condition, it's easy to treat with hydroxychloroquine. And he used 600 milligrams of, actually I think it's 6 milligrams. This might be an old slide. I believe it's 6 milligrams of hydroxychloroquine, that's right, and azithromycin. And no, it is 600. 600 milligrams of hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin. Then came this guy, Zelenko in New York reads what Didier Raoult is doing and is one of the ones that let Donald Trump know you should take a look at this. But he discovers something. If you add zinc, zinc kills the virus too, so I can lower the dosage from 600 milligrams to 400 milligrams with azithromycin and zinc. And he had nothing but elderly patients and had the best safety record in the world, protecting all of his patients in New York City. And so I would ask you, if your government cares about you, if your medical establishment is really trying to make you healthier, wouldn't you imagine you're now head of HHS or NIH or CDC? You're going to do a study on hydroxychloroquine to see if it really works. Would you call these guys, the original dudes? They're having massive success, making big, bold statements. We're curing it. Neither one of these guys ever got a call. Not one. Our government didn't care. Instead, they wanted to run studies on their own. And what did they do? Remember, 400 milligrams, 600 milligrams. On the Solidarity and Recovery clinical trials, the recovery trial used 1.86 grams of hydroxychloroquine, which equals 2,400 milligrams of hydroxychloroquine in the first 24 hours of treatment of already very ill hospitalized COVID-19 patients, a potentially lethal dose. The Canadian and Norwegian trials used 2,000 milligrams of hydroxychloroquine based in the first 24 hours. Each trial gave patients a cumulative dose during the first 24 hours that, when given as a single dose, has been documented to be lethal. The drug's half-life is about a month, so the cumulative amount is important. Not only did your government deny access to a drug that could have saved your loved ones, they staged a trial and murdered people in it so that they could say this drug does not work. They murdered them. And I would argue murdered the 500,000 Americans that should have had this drug. You ever hear the Tuskegee experiment? When black men were left with syphilis and never given penicillin, even though they knew it would have cured them so they could study them? We all just went through a Tuskegee experiment, and it killed 500,000 people. If only the story stopped there. Hydroxychloroquine is dead. All of a sudden, this doctor goes before our Senate with a new idea.
We have evidence that ivermectin is effective not only in prophylaxis, in the prevention. If you take it, you will not get sick. We just came across a trial last night from Argentina by the lead investigator of ivermectin in Argentina, Dr. Hector Carvalho. They prophylaxed 800 healthcare workers. Not one got sick. In the 400 that they didn't prophylax with ivermectin, 58% got sick. 237 of those 400 got sick. If you take it, you will not get sick. It has immense and potent antiviral activity. We know that from the first study in Monash, it has made the bench to the bedside. Prophylaxis, we now have 4 large randomized controlled trials totaling over 1,500 patients, each trial showing that as a prophylaxis agent, it is immensely effective. You will not get sick. You will be protected from getting ill if you take it. In early outpatient treatment, we have 3 randomized controlled trials and multiple observation as well as case series showing that if you take ivermectin, the need for hospitalization and death will decrease. The most profound evidence we have is in the hospitalized patients. We have 4 randomized controlled trials there, multiple observation trials, all showing the same thing. You will not die, or you will die at much, much, much lower rates. Statistically significant, large magnitude results if you take ivermectin. It is proving to be a wonder drug. It has already won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2015 for its impacts on global health in the eradication of parasitic diseases. It is proving to be an immensely powerful antiviral and anti-inflammatory agent. It is critical for its use in this disease.
I mean, randomized controlled trials, in hospital, out of trial, all across the world, evidence, 80% reduction in death using ivermectin. So this great doctor, Tess Lawrie, worked for the WHO. She actually has her own private nonprofit. She gets hired by the WHO all the time to study studies. She's an expert on the ethics of science and studies. So she'll get brought in to look at a study. Would it be ethical to give one group this and that group that? And then she decides if it's ethical. If a study's been done, she'll study the study and say whether or not the results are accurate. She's an expert on studies. She sees Pierre Corey in front of our own Senate describing this drug that's 80% effective at stopping this disease. And she's like, oh my God, this is the answer. I'm not doing anything right now. She rings up Pierre Corey and says, Pierre, I want to help you. I'm an expert at randomized controlled trials. I'm also an expert at doing meta-analysis, meaning let's get every study on ivermectin from around the world right now, put it all together. He says, great, Tess, great to meet you. Get on board. We have an amazing team. She says, you know what we should do? We should get someone from the WHO on our team so that once we finally prove this, they'll be able to broadcast it out to the world and we can stop this epidemic immediately. He says, we're already a step ahead of you, Tess. We got Andrew Hill. Dr. Andrew Hill is at the WHO. He called me. He's tweeting out right now, this is the answer. I've seen the science. It's amazing. He's working with us, and we're working with him to write this paper right now. They all get together. They're brainstorming. They're working on the cure for this disease that's sweeping the world. They're going to be heroes. And then it comes down to the moment where they have to publish. And Dr. Andrew Hill is the lead publisher because he's the WHO guy. Let him do it. It'll get all of the power it needs. And so he sends over the transcript of what he's about to release to the public. And they read it, and they're mystified. It says a lot of what they meant. Andrew Hill, on behalf of the International Ivermectin Project team, here's my study. This meta-analysis of 18 randomized controlled trials of 2,282 patients showed a 75% improvement in survival, faster time to clinical recovery, and signs of a dose-dependent effect of viral clearance for patients given ivermectin versus controlled treatment. Boom. Amazing. We're there. Except they're like, wait a minute. Andrew Hill just added a paragraph. What is this paragraph he's just put in the study? Discussion. Many studies that were included were not yet published or peer-reviewed, and meta-analysis are prone to confounding issues. Furthermore, there was a wide variation in standards of care across trials, and ivermectin dose and duration of treatment was heterogeneous. Ivermectin should be validated in larger, appropriately controlled randomized trials before the results are sufficient for review by regulatory authorities. All the things he's saying, by the way, it's not heterogeneous. That actually means ivermectin is even more impressive. It means that they didn't give it the same way every time in a very controlled way. It didn't matter how they gave this product, how much of it they gave, how often they gave it. It worked everywhere they looked. The more you gave, the better the benefits. It's the safest drug on earth. It's the only drug we know of that has no problem interacting with any other drug there is. And it's having a 75% reduction in every trial they looked at, not just some of them. But this paragraph shows up that is going to destroy this paper forever. It's going to rob the world of ivermectin. And Tess Lawrie decides, I have to call Dr. Andrew Hill. Pierre, I got to call him. He's like, I don't know what's going on. This is devastating. I don't understand what happened. Just yesterday, we had him. The paper was everything we needed. What just happened? I want you to imagine she's going to call Andrew Hill. She's going to have a Zoom call. Think about this moment. Tess Lawrie, sweet little scientist. If she can't get Andrew Hill to change this on this paper, millions of people are going to die needlessly. I wonder what that Zoom call was like. We've all had that business call. It's an important one. You're kind of like, okay. I guess I'm ready to do it. Luckily, we have this Zoom call, folks. I believe you're about to watch one of the most amazing things you'll ever see in humanity. Any question you've ever had about how people do what they do? She gets up the courage, and this is how the call starts.
I think I'm in a very sensitive position here. What I'm trying to do.
People are in sensitive positions. They're in hospital and ICUs dying, and they need this medicine.
Well,
this is what I don't get. You know, because you're not a clinician, you're not at the cold place, you're not seeing people dying every day, and this medicine prevents deaths by 80%. So 80% of those people who are dying today don't need to die because there's ivermectin.
There are a lot, as I said, there are a lot of different opinions about this. As I said, some people.
We're looking at the data. It doesn't matter what other people say. We are the ones who are tasked with and we have the experience to look at the data and reassure everybody that this cheap and effective treatment will save lives. It's clear. You don't have to say, well, so-and-so says this and so-and-so says that. It's absolutely crystal clear. We can save lives today if we can get the government to buy ivermectin.
She's saying people are going to die, Andrew. What are we doing? You know it. You've seen this with your own eyes, an 80% reduction in death. It's like, I know, but as I've told you, there's these other people that just don't believe this. She's like, what do they matter? They're not scientists, Andrew. We are the ones. We're the only scientists in the world that have looked at all the evidence that exists. We are unanimous in what we're seeing with our own eyes. What difference does it make what these other people are saying? Really good question. What difference does it make? Listen to this guy.
Rest assured, I'm not going to let this last for a long time. I'm not saying we keep going for another year.
The fact that you're saying you're not going to let it last for a long time makes you realize the impact of your work. So how long are you going to let people carry on dying unnecessarily? Up to you. What is the timeline that you've allowed for this then?
Well, what I hope is that this stalemate that we're in doesn't last very long. It lasts a matter of weeks, and I guarantee I will push for this to last for as short amount of time as possible.
So how long do you think the stalemate will go on for? How long do you think your
well, okay,
is going to allow the stalemate to go on for?
From my side, every single new trial that comes through, we're going to be aggressively adding it on, and I think end of Feb will be there. 6 weeks.
How many people die every day?
Well, there is a whole group of people who think that ivermectin is complete rubbish. It's
not talking about them. I'm not talking about them. I'm saying we know the evidence. How many people die every day?
Oh, sure. I mean, 15,000 people a day.
15,000 people a day times 6 weeks.
Yeah, sure.
First,
I get
you have to try and get it into the UK.
You just watched how a person justifies killing 15,000 people a day for 6 weeks. And I want to be clear. He's probably not aware this Zoom call is being recorded. So if there's some part of you that's trying to make a reason for this, he's a scientist, maybe he didn't see what he wanted to see. He is not saying to her in privacy, Tess, we're being overzealous. If you really look at it, these trials really weren't as robust as they should have been. I have real problems with this. He's not saying that at all. He's saying, I know, Tess, I know, but these other people, whoever these other people are, they need to see something. And my goal is I'm going to just, every time there's a new study, I'm going to keep adding it because I'm with you. I'm trying to get this approved. What do you mean approved? She's saying, we're the top experts in the world. All you have to do is print this, put this out, and the whole world will be saved. 80% of the people. Well, there's people that are saying it's rubbish. I don't care about them, Andrew. How many people are you going to let die? Well, yeah, sure. 15,000 people a day. I'm hoping to be done in 6 weeks. We can have a lot of judgments about Nazis and what people do. And this guy is a scientist. He knows what's happening. Just out of curiosity, how many people believe what you just saw would be described as evil? Is he evil? Maybe. I guess it depends on your definition. because it's clear he's dealing with some bureaucracy we're not seeing. He's dealing with some issues, these people that don't believe in ivermectin, and he's trying to make them happy. I'm assuming maybe WHO has something to do with it. And he's probably telling himself, I'm sure it sounds like it, trust me, I'm with you. We just got to get a few more studies. 6 more weeks is all we have to let the death happen, and then we'll be there. Of course, as we all know, it turned into horse paste, and no one ever got this thing. But before I'm going to let you walk down the street feeling like you know what evil is. Remember, God said, judge that you be not judged. He's letting people die. Yeah, I suppose that's evil. But how many of us knew there was issues with the vaccine? Knew that ivermectin probably worked or hydroxychloroquine worked, but we didn't say it to our sister. Or we didn't bring it up at the Thanksgiving table because we just didn't want to disrupt the vibe of the room. How many of us looked the other way when we had truth we could have shared? I did. I'll admit it. There was conversations I didn't have. I wish I had. I think in many ways, many of us looked the other way. Those that you didn't, great. But I want us to get out of this idea that evil is just weakness. Evil is just a lack of courage most of the time. Not stepping into your truth and recognize that you're not only created in the image and likeness of God, but God has given you a voice. And you better be using it, or people will die. So, right at this time, in fact, just days before this headline came out, Unitaid-funded long-acting medicine center at University of Liverpool to shape the future of treatment. In fact, it went on to say that $30 million was given to the University of Liverpool just 3 days before this article was written. Any idea who works at the University of Liverpool? Andrew Hill. This is how Tony Fauci did what he did. This is how our science is manipulated every time a doctor or a scientist decides to look into a cure, or maybe vaccines cause autism. Their university will either get a call saying, you know that $50 million we gave you last year? Do you want another grant for $50 million? We don't like this study that's going on over here. Oh, University of Liverpool, hey, it's Bill Gates. Yeah, I was thinking of giving you guys a $30 million grant. But there's a study over there that's making you guys kind of controversial. And if you didn't put it out, it'd make it a lot easier for me to give you $30 million. Oh, really? We'll talk to Andrew Hill. You think that's what happened? Listen to this.
All right. So whose conclusions are those on the review that you've done? Who's not listed as an author who's actually contributed?
Well, I mean, I don't really want to get into. I mean,
I think it needs to be clear. I would like to know who are these other voices that are in your paper that are not acknowledged. Does Unitaid have a say? Do they influence what you write?
Unitaid has a say in the conclusions of the paper, yeah.
Okay, so who is it in Unitaid then who is sharing who is giving you opinion on your evidence?
Well, it's just the people there. I
thought Unitaid is just a charity. Is it not a charity?
Yeah.
That actually have, so they have a say in your conclusions.
Yeah.
Unitaid had a say. They're going to write the conclusion. I thought they were just a charity, she says. Yeah, well, they're involved. I thought we had everyone in the room that was involved. Why didn't you invite Unitaid in the room? If they were going to be a part of this, why weren't they here when we were having all the deliberations over the science? Isn't that how science is done? Well, no, not in this case. Tess Lori tried. He's tried to save millions and millions of lives across the world. And this is how that Zoom call ends.
What I've got to do, my responsibility is to get as much support as I can to get this drug approved as quickly as
Well,
I
you're
can.
not going to get it approved the way you've written that conclusion. You've actually shot yourself in the foot, and you've shot us all in the foot. Everybody trying to do something good. You have actually completely destroyed it.
Okay, well that's where I guess we'll have to agree to differ.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how you sleep at night, honestly.
Okay.
It's not a reality show. You watch the two people in a conversation that decide the fate of your loved ones right there. That's where it happened. That paper came out the next day. They called ivermectin horse paste. They made it so that you couldn't even go to a CVS and get it if you had a doctor brave enough to prescribe it. Hydroxychloroquine could have saved 500,000 people in America. Ivermectin potentially could have saved 800,000 people in America. But they needed you in a vaccine program. That was more important. To deny you access to life-saving drugs. And by the way, who is Unitaid? Unitaid's core donors are France, the United Kingdom, Norway, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Shocker. Mission accomplished. No drug available.
This is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you. So tonight, I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers with 100 or more employees that together employ over 80 million workers to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated.
The World Health Organization gets together and says, how do we stop vaccine hesitancy? A virus sweeps the world that used to be just a cold. Drugs are available to minimize the damage, which would have been all we would have needed to have gotten through this. Instead, they force a vaccine, and we can't go to work. Our kids can't go to school. Our society is destroyed. We're told to wear masks. Our schools are shut down. Everything goes wrong. And we get lined up for a vaccine. I'm going to skip through. You know most of the rest of it. The vaccine didn't stop transmission. The vaccine didn't work. And I think really at the heart of it was an even bigger issue we need to be thinking about right now. The World Economic Forum put out this video right before all this happened too. You're all going to own nothing, and you're going to be happy about it. Whatever you want to do, you're going to be a renter, and everything will be delivered to you in your house where you'll be stuck. The U.S. won't be the world's leading superpower any longer, and a handful of countries like China will dominate. You won't die waiting for an organ donor. We're going to have machines, basically, that can do that for you. You won't eat meat. You won't have any microbiome. Everything's going to come from a lab, and we're going to tell you that's how we're going to save you from global warming. 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change, we're sure about it. And we'll have to do a better job at welcoming and integrating all the refugees. They're going to start fights in your streets, potentially have all sorts of problems with your children and girls. Global price of carbon, we'll charge it. And maybe someday we can escape this planet we've messed up and go live on Mars. Scientists have worked it out. You'll be healthy in space. Western values would have been tested to the breaking point. The American system will have crashed. Checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten. You must give all that you believe in. Give up your individuality. Vaccinate yourself for your neighbor, even when it doesn't work. That global idea has just swept Almost every nation except the United States of America. In England, they're throwing people in jail if you text or tweet about maybe just this video. You're against the government, you're in jail. Freedom's gone. First Amendment rights are gone. In this last election, the Democrats run on the fact that they were going to stop misinformation. And at the heart of it was this. Do you realize how close we were to a vaccine passport? How do you stop vaccine hesitancy? Make it so that your vaccine record is on your phone. You can't go to a restaurant. You can't go into your church. You can't go onto an airplane. You can't see anywhere in the world. You'll be stuck in your house. Maybe even it's what will turn on your electric car. And if you're not vaccinated, guess who doesn't get to go to work? Oh, and by the way, we're tracking your carbon credits. You've eaten too many steaks this week. It's a cricket patty for you. It'd be funny if it weren't all so terrifying. But this is one of the lead voices of the World Economic Forum. Listen to him very carefully.
COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance. If we want to stop this epidemic, we need not just to monitor people, we need to monitor what's happening under their skin.
What we have seen so far, it's corporations and governments collecting data about where we go, who we meet, what movies we watch. The next phase is the surveillance going under our skin. We're now seeing mass surveillance systems established even in democratic countries, which previously rejected them. And we also see a change in the nature of surveillance. Previously, surveillance was mainly above the skin. Now it's going under the skin. Governments want to know not just where we go or who we meet. Above all, they want to know what is happening under our skin. What's our body temperature? What's our blood pressure? What is our medical condition? Now humans are developing even bigger powers than ever before. We are really acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. We are really upgrading humans into gods. We are acquiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life. I know that in recent years, we saw populist politicians undermining deliberately the trust that people have in important institutions like universities, like respectable media outlets. These populist politicians told people that, say, scientists are this small elite, disconnected from the real people. I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news. Humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
The WEF puts this guy out as their messenger. They're not like, oh, keep him quiet. They're like, no, Yuval, Noah Harari. Everybody here for Yuval, Noah Harari. Get out there to the public. Tell them what we're up to. Oh, we're going to take away your homes. You're all going to be renting. You know that you're just hackable animals. The government wants to inject you with products. You don't know what they're doing. They're going to be monitoring what's happening under your skin because that's what they care about. They want to know when you're watching an election, your emotions. Is your blood rising when you're hearing Hillary Clinton speak? If so, maybe we should visit you like Minority Report and get you on the program. This is not a joke. This world is right around the corner, which is why I told this guy, Bobby, you better run for president. And we did. He ran as a Democrat, way too corrupt, gave it our best. We said, well, something's telling us to stay in this, so let's run as independents. So we switched over and ran as independents, but then we got unceremoniously kicked out of the debate. By the way, that debate, think about it just for a second. The night that Joe Biden showed the world that he was actually a vegetable, making Donald Trump seem really intelligent. Can you imagine if Robert Kennedy Jr. had been allowed on that stage that night? We staged the real debate. We were having him answer the questions at the same time. Over 10 million people watched our version of the debate, and 98% said that Robert Kennedy Jr. won that debate. I assure you, had CNN let Robert Kennedy Jr. into that debate, I think Bobby would have woke up the next morning in this country and people would have been saying, that guy's smarter than everybody, I want him to be president. But the system's rigged. And then, in an incredible moment, Donald Trump and the assassination attempt. I'm not political, I'm politically marooned, but I will tell you honestly, we all dodged a bullet this day. Every one of us. Because the Democrats, no matter what you were thinking, were promising the end of free speech. All of their misinformation of lies on hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, taking licenses away from doctors who were telling you and trying to treat you with those drugs, were making it up themselves, finding compounding pharmacies, were being arrested. That was our future. The dream of our founding fathers was literally hanging in the balance. If you do not have a First Amendment right to say whatever you think, honestly, even lie if you wanted to. That is how our system's designed. But when the liars, your government that made up the science, hid the products from you, are telling you we're going to decide what truth is, folks, it was over. That was end time. But then this happened. And Donald Trump held his hand in the air with blood rolling down his face. As communications director for Robert Kennedy Jr., I was watching my television and I said, well, it's over for us. That guy's going to be the next president of the United States. But Bobby decided to call Trump for his own reasons. They had a conversation. He asked Trump if he was okay. But shockingly, they had this beautiful interaction. And Trump said to Bobby, Bobby, we are fighting the same enemy, and I'm tired of fighting you. I want you to heal the children. You know more about that than I do, but I know you're right. We both know we're on the verge of World War III. Come help me. Drop this. You've done a great job. You're on the ballot in all 50 states. Amazing. But they're not going to let you in, Bobby. They're going to cheat you. And together we can make sure they can't cheat. One of the most important speeches that ever happened was a month later. We'd met all day discussing should you join Trump or not. It was one of the hardest decisions a Kennedy, a Democrat, a man could ever make. And I also want to remind you that not only he'd already had his family speaking against him, he'd already left the Democratic Party, but tens of thousands of people across the country had stood in the freezing cold gathering signatures to get him on the ballot. They'd sweated it out in 117 degrees in Las Vegas with a dream of him being president. And I will tell you that weighed heavy on his heart. How do I let all those people down? We all spent the whole day in Hyannisport talking about it. And we said, Bobby, you're not a martyr. You're not here to make some point, and we do not think there's any way to win. But there is a way to save the children of this country and the world. And even if it's a long shot, we all believe you should take that shot. And this is how he said it to the world.
I watched generations of children get sicker and sicker. I had 11 siblings, and I had 7 kids myself. I was conscious of what was happening in their classrooms and to their friends, and I watched these sick kids, these damaged kids. In that generation, almost all of them are damaged. And nobody in power seemed to care or to even notice. For 19 years, I prayed every morning that God would put me in a position to end this calamity. The chronic disease crisis was one of the primary reasons for my running for president, along with ending censorship in the Ukraine war. It's the reason I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. Ultimately, the future, however it happens, is in God's hands and in the hands of the American voters and those of President Trump. If President Trump is elected and honors his word, the vast burden of chronic disease that now demoralizes and bankrupts the country will disappear. This is a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. I'm 70 years old. I may have a decade to be effective. I can't imagine that President Harris would allow me or anyone to solve these dire problems. After 8 years of President Harris, any opportunity for me to fix the problem will be out of my reach forever. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through. Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country and our children is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other. The most unifying theme for all Americans is that we all love our children. If we all unite around that issue now, we can finally give them the protection, the health, and the future that they deserve.
It was an amazing morning. It was hard to sit through that speech. I'd been trying to get the press to listen to Bobby, to let him on to the news. In the entire 2.5 years he ran for president, he only appeared on mainstream news 2 times, both under ridicule, but they wouldn't let the world know he was there. And so we kept bobbing and weaving and going where we felt we were guided. And all the press was there that day. They couldn't wait to be in the room to see him stepping down. When it was over, I said, Bobby, I'd seen the speech. He'd been working on it the night before. I was like, are you almost done? He's like, oh, I'm working on it. I actually was at the hotel, and the cameras were all lining up, and it was like 45 minutes away. I was like, Bobby, where are you? I wanted you to test the teleprompter here. They're like, don't bother him. He's still writing. He's still writing. The moment, the hour we said it was supposed to start, I'm like, where is he? They're like, he's still working on it. He showed up 40 minutes late. And I just said, Bobby, this may be the moment we ran. Right now, tell the world the truth. Tell them what we know. And he did. And we knew that afternoon we would be walking over to a stadium where Donald Trump was speaking. And I was standing in that audience with his son, Bobby 3, we call him, his oldest son. And I said, his place is packed, it's massive. And I said, has your father ever spoke to an audience like this? He's like, this many people? He's like, yeah, defeat the mandates in D.C., it's probably like this many people. He's like, but this audience? Never. It's packed with MAGA hats and conservatives. So we didn't know till Donald Trump mentioned his name, and the place exploded. Exploded. Thundering, pounding their seats. Bobby, Bobby. It was amazing. After being ridiculed by the party that he'd been raised in for 2.5 years, after being ignored by the press, suddenly Bobby found his people.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Watch him as he goes. And I also want to salute Bobby's decades of work as an advocate for the health of our families and our children. Nobody's done more. Millions and millions of Americans who want clean air, clean water, and a healthy nation have concerns about toxins in our environment and pesticides in our food. That's why today I'm repeating my pledge to establish a panel of top experts working with Bobby to investigate what is causing the decades-long increase in chronic health problems and childhood diseases, including autoimmune disorders, autism, obesity, infertility, and many more.
Thank you, President Trump. A few hours after the assassination attempt at Butler, I got a call from a safe food advocate named Kelly Means, who's been fighting for many years to try to end the corruption at CDC and FDA and USDA. And these institutions, these regulatory agencies, are actually run by the big food processing companies, the big ag and the chemical companies that they're supposed to regulate. And he said to me that he'd been advising me for many years and on my campaign. And he told me that night that he was also advising President Trump. And he asked if I would talk to President Trump. And I said, of course. And about a few minutes later, I got a call from the president. And we talked. We had a very good talk. Don't you want a safe environment for your children? Don't you want to know that the food that you're feeding them is not filled with chemicals that are going to give them cancer and chronic disease? And don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again? Thank you all very, very much, and God bless you, and God bless America.
My mom told me, you can change the world. Of course, I'm just a cog in this giant machine like we all are. I truly believe we all have a destiny. I think we're here alive in this moment for a very specific reason. The fate of humanity, the possibility of freedom is hanging in the balance right now. We may only have 3.5 years under these two individuals to make all the difference we can make before this pendulum starts to swing back and that tidal wave that is destroying freedom around the world hits our shores. They're going to demoralize you. They're going to tell you Bobby Kennedy is off course. He's not standing up for you. Look at their liars. Don't believe in them. They're going to do everything they can to make you believe that you are weak, that you are sick, that you have no power, that you need pharma to be alive. Do not listen to these lunatics. And a lot of your friends will listen. We need to build an ark right now. We need to build community right now. We need to find the people that are questioning it and having an ability to actually ask questions and tell them the truth. We need to bring them all together. We need to build our farms. We need to build our institutions of health outside of the pharmaceutical industry. We need to find each other, and we need to rise up now because we are God's people. We were promised Eden. We were promised the ability to return. And the fact that Robert Kennedy Jr., the most hated man in mainstream news, the most hated man by every health department in the world, just put his hand on a Bible and became the most powerful person in health in the world. God is in you. God is with us. And never doubt, the small group of thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you. Thank you very much.